Campaign and conquest, let's play TTRPGs done right. War games and gaming, with Storm and Magenta tonight. We got a new system best you'll ever see. A paracosmic convergence of distant masterpiece. It's got the hit shots and plays every genre so well that you would think it was crafted in the depths of hell. It's campaigns and conquests, the best that there is. War games and gaming, with a system that wins. Whether you're a pro or a fighting kid, we've got something better, it's really the shit. Custom worlds, random tables galore, got all the backcomes and so much more. It's campaigns and conquests, the only true way. War games and gaming, all night and all day. It's campaigns and conquests, better subscribe to the show. War games and gaming, and now you know. It's campaigns and conquests, and we're feeling alright. War games and gaming, we're Storm and Magenta tonight.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to a very special episode of Campaigns and Conquests. I'm your co-host, Magenta, joined tonight by Storm, as usual, and we also have a very special guest tonight for a very special show. Aaron is here with us, and we're going to be talking about his game, TinyD10. So very exciting stuff happening today, and glad to see folks joining us. Welcome, Wayne. I do want to remind everyone that comments are welcome. We do read those and keep in touch on those, but you're also welcome to request if you want to come up on the mic and you have something to say and share. Please feel free to let us know. And with that said, want to introduce Storm. You want to say hi, Storm?
Hi, Storm.
And Aaron, welcome to the show. It's good to have you.
Awesome. Thanks, Magenta. Thanks, Storm. I appreciate you guys having me on.
Yeah, it's our pleasure. So I'm really excited to hear about your game. So, I want to hear a little bit about like the concept of your game, like what inspired you when you were creating it, and a few details, whatever you'd like to share, just to start us off.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd be happy to share. So let's see. It's TinyD10 is it's almost 12 years old, I want to say at this point. I kind of first put pen to paper back in 2013. I was kind of inspired to do it because I wanted to bring my younger kids, they were 4 and 5 at the time, into tabletop role-playing games. I had kind of gotten hooked on them just a few years earlier with some friends of mine. I kind of got started with TTRPGs pretty late in life. I was, 20, 21. First started playing with D&D 4E, and then connected with a group who was playing a more OSR style rule set, basic expert, and really became enamored with that. So when my game group kind of moved away, I was looking for somebody else to play with, and I realized my kids are probably old enough for this. So I went out and I looked for some kind of ultra light rule sets for fantasy play, and I found some decent ones, and we kind of played those and kind of hacked at them and just adjusted them to the kids kind of their level of play, really the style that they kind of exhibited as we learned it together. And that's really kind of the inception of TinyD10. Originally, it was just a single page of rules, and it kind of grew along with my kids and our style of play. And as they became able to kind of handle more kind of complex concepts, we kind of added some of those into the game. And over the course of probably 4 or 5 years, it grew eventually into a 10-page rule set. So that's where it sits right now. The core rules is 10 pages. I still consider it an ultralight system. It's got, I think, just enough rules to get you playing and kind of guide you in doing whatever you want. And otherwise, the rules kind of get out of the way. It says in the book, and the rest is just kind of up to the fate and chance and destiny.
Right. That sounds exciting. I really like that that you started with your kids and got them involved, because that's a special passion of mine. I have grandkids myself, and
Awesome.
Yeah, I want to make sure that they have a chance to engage in that kind of play and kind of learn to really kind of let your imagination drive the action of the story. And I think that's, so much more interactive and better for kids than just playing a video game where it's really a click fest kind of thing.
Oh
So
yeah, yeah, it totally is. There's such a broader way to use your imagination, and so much more fun to be had that way. I've said it before. Many people have said it before. Game studios are spending millions of dollars and years to emulate just a fraction of what people can do when they sit down at their table and play a free game together. So
right,
We had Fred
absolutely.
Rogers. We had Fred Rogers. We had Lincoln Logs. We had Legos. My start was in wargaming. I started playing in sandboxes,
mhm.
and when the PC came along, well, computers were around, but the personal computer you could fit on your desk came along. It was uh, it was the substitute.
Mhm.
It was when if it was raining, or
Right. Yep. Yep.
if your game buddy was at the doctor with his mom's or something like that, and you couldn't play a good game, then you went over to that thing and turned it on. Now, unfortunately, it seems like it's kind of reversed itself in that manner with a lot of people today. So
Yeah, yeah, it very much has, and you kind of see that reflected too in the way that people approach tabletop role playing games in general today. There's a huge shift in the way adventures are designed, and the way modules are kind of interacted with, to the point where people want something that looks more like a video game that follows kind of a sort of strict narrative, rather than just kind of open world sandbox style play.
yeah, yeah, they're missing out. And the mechanics seem to be doing that too. And of course, then my grumpy old butt, I start barking at the cloud because we did this stuff and we enjoyed it. And I think that I like the idea that you start small
Hmm.
and you get something simple so people can, I'm making my own thing and I'm looking at it the same way. I analogize it with a pool. You know, at least the way I get into a pool, I get in and I just feel like an old lady and just kind of get into that shallow end. And once I feel comfortable, then maybe I'll doggy paddle over to the deep end. But it's just, generally submersing yourself slowly instead of. I had an instructor that explained it. He goes, "You're going to learn a lot." I was at computer school, and he says, "You're about to learn a lot. It'll be like drinking from a fire hose.
Hmm.
Having all that information." That's when people go, "Yeah, maybe I'll just turn on the Nintendo." So
Right.
easing them into it is really a good approach for people.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's one thing to drink from a fire hose in the professional environment, where it's very important that you learn and quickly. But yeah, people can get burned out if they just get too much information when all they're trying to do is, have fun. Especially
Yeah.
when kind of from the outside, tabletop role playing games look very simple. It's yeah, I want to do something, I roll a dice to see if I can do it, and that should be that, right?
Yeah.
But in order to kind of make sure that the game is fair, in order to kind of give a more of a kind of a simulation, kind of a deeper experience, you got to tack some extra rules on there.
Yeah. It's there. There's and what do you get? You get people that how do you say it? I don't want to be. Well, how do I do this? If you
Hmm.
don't have some guideline, they'll start scratching their head. Oh yeah, well I don't want a lot of rules, but I don't know how to do it. So you want to
Right.
start getting more and more in there so that those kind of things are considered. So it's
Hmm.
the easing in. But if you don't have that, I remember really not role playing, but the principle still applies. Is there was a miniatures game called Axis and Allies Miniatures,
Hmm. Oh
and
yeah.
remember everybody go, I don't want that. I don't want that ASL. I've done that before. I don't want to play that squad leader. That's too much. And they got handed the pamphlet of rules that came with that thing, and the hell is this? I can't do anything with that. And they immediately started tacking on, let's build some bridges, let's put some
Hmm.
minefields in there, stuff like that, because you want to have that breadth and scope in a game. Otherwise, it gets boring. It's
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
only having
Absolutely.
one level on a PC game. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And that's something that we actually ran into in the very early years of TinyD10 is we got a lot of play out of it. We always kind of did that open world sandbox style play,
Mhm.
and then I realized like, okay, well, what now? We didn't have an advancement system. And it just kind of dawned on us after a couple of years of play, and the kids ready to grow, ready to advance characters, and kind of have a deeper experience with the game. That yeah, really you got to tack that in. You got to kind of build for scale, and that's one of the ways to scale it up and increase the depth, like you said, at which you can engage with a game.
Mhm. Mhm. Yep. It's so. Are you sticking with the sandbox? Or are you eventually thinking of going towards at least some sort of module system for people too? Or
Yeah, yeah. So I'm definitely considering that. So with the fantasy core rules, there's obviously the 10-page rule set, and then there's about 20 or so, maybe 25 pages worth of monsters, just over 100 monsters, and then the final kind of book in that collection is a single session adventure called The Broken Light, and it's kind of more of a module than really anything else that I've ever put together. It's an island, some monsters, some mystery, and it takes about 2 to 3 hours to kind of play through. So it's a single session adventure for sure. But I did build it in a way that it's modular, and we have been playing over the years through kind of a more of I guess like a conventional kind of story type of play, and I'm able to do that just because, like I said, I finish these things that I'm working on and kind of keep them open ended. The whole system is modular, so that you can plug things in and pull things out, replace them with other systems or subsystems. But yeah, so there are some additional modules that kind of plug into the Broken Light that I just haven't released because I just take a very long time to really do anything. But we've played through them, and we've got a lot of value out of them. It's a lot of fun to kind of bring a more of a sandbox style of play to a little bit more, I guess, narrative heavy module. So, it's definitely something on my radar. But, for now, I'm happy to just have, one adventure out there that people can pick up and play and, in a relatively short order.
it's a at
That
the very. Oh, I'm sorry, Magenta. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, I actually wanted to, that brings up a question that was actually kind of on my list of things to ask you is
Mhm.
in your gaming, how do you find that balance between like having the narrative and maintaining like a storyline with the player and being able to give that freedom to explore in that sandbox type of experience? And like, what's your balance point? And
Yeah, yeah, that's a really good question. And it's something that I find really easy to do in that sandbox style open world. It's any time that I spend preparing is spent kind of, breathing a little bit of life into the world itself, so that all the players have to do is make up their minds as to what direction they want to go. There's something in every direction. There are things that are happening. There are events that are unfolding. There are monsters or factions that are kind of always at work in the background. So just kind of having an understanding of what a living world looks like and how these things are moving throughout the world and interacting with each other. That just kind of develops, obviously a very kind of open-ended style of play. But there's always a story in there, and the story is typically whatever the players uncover as they move in whatever direction and pursue whatever interests they're currently taken with.
That's great. I want to address that real quick. I just seeing I've got so many new viewers. If you see me, if I look like I've had too many pixie sticks, I got a bad back, and I can't
Oh,
I
that's
can't
rough.
sit still. So that's why I'm a little bit fluttery. But I like that too. And I was trying to. I don't know that I'm all that articulate, especially on social media. When you have that much to work with, it's
Right?
even
They don't
harder
give
to
you a lot.
express yourself. Yeah, yeah. But I like the idea of, and I do this myself. Is I want a world that can function first without the players. And
Hmm.
that sounds odd. Why would you want that? But you want everything moving. You want a completely dynamic world. And
Yep.
then when they move around, because I don't like the idea of it reminds me of a lot of the MMOs, which are fine to play. We enjoy
Yeah.
them. Me and Magenta play Lord of the Rings, but when you play Lord of the Rings, you walk up to some character that's standing there like a kiosk and has
Hmm.
5 things to say and an option, and that's it.
They were just
And
waiting for you.
yeah, right. They're not, they should be out slopping the pigs or hammering on their blacksmith or whatever they're doing, their
Right.
anvil. So I like to have everybody doing everything. So I did play a campaign last year where we had a guy that was trying. He goes, "I'll break you. You can't possibly have everything up." So it was a great challenge. So that no matter what he did, we had something for him because he says,
Right.
"Yeah, yeah, yeah, that was
Well, that's
fun."
where the random tables come in.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Yep. You can always have an idea if you can just if you don't have one, roll it up. There'll
Yep.
be something
Exactly.
there. Well, that's great. I like that. That's good. So we see David Brown has said he's already downloaded it and he's followed. instantly intrigued by the biblical dedication by the author.
Oh, thank you, David. I appreciate that. Yeah. And that's something that I've always kind of, tried to express in my work. Just, in the same way that Tolkien did. Tolkien says that, the Lord of the Rings was, a Catholic story. Not explicitly originally, but through the revisions. But you don't always get that sense, but it does come across with the moral intent of the author. So that's kind of what I try to put into all my work is kind of where I stand, my perspective and my relationship with the Lord there. So
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Great, great. Magenta, anything else for you?
Well, yeah. So I'm there's an obvious question we haven't gotten to yet, and I want to make sure we don't get too far before I forget to ask. What is the nature of the world that you've created? Would you say if you had to sum it up in just a few words for um,
yeah, yeah. I would say honestly, generic fantasy. There's nothing that I think necessarily has a very strong fingerprint on it. I don't really do anything like innovative in terms of how this monster is imagined, or how the magic system works. I really did try to create as generic of a fantasy world as possible, so people can impress their idea of fantasy on the world. It's very much a blank slate in the sense that what I want to do with the rule set, with the setting itself, is just give people just enough to work off of, kind of a springboard for their own creativity. So the ideas that they have about elves and dwarves and monsters and fantasy settings in general can be expressed through that. So yeah, like I said, it's kind of a very generic fantasy world in that sense. And then for my own personal use, I put kind of a I don't know, maybe a sort of Robert E. Howard twist into the adventures and the worlds that we run. Right now, I'm creating a new setting. Kind of hex crawl style setting called the Island of the Ape Men, and that's actually over on the website as well. I'm kind of cataloging how I'm developing each hex, and we'll probably have some after action sort of reports as me and the kids we play through it. But it's just an island, in kind of, like I said, that Howard tradition, that Edgar Rice Burroughs tradition of bestial men, beautiful women, and dangerous, deadly creatures, and weird crystals, and just kind of that same level of intrigue, just kind of hidden behind that primeval fascia.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. See, I've had a lot of people say we don't want any more rules. We want more worlds, and we want
Hmm.
more places like that. And I'm you know, unfortunate because I what I was thinking was somewhat along the same lines. What I went with was a vehicle to go to whatever destination you want to create or
Right.
find. That's what
Yeah,
I wanted
absolutely.
to do.
mhm.
But instead of pigeonholing myself into something where it's all about this. So, and that sounded like too. I saw somewhere it mentioned that go ahead and take this and go to some other genre as well. It looks like you've got it set up so we could do sci-fi or gangsters or anything like that.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yep. That's what the SRD is there for. Again, the whole system is very modular just because I built it from the ground up, and I built it in such a way that, as the need for something new like advancement system arose, we were able to kind of just plug that in. So it just naturally became a modular, kind of design. And so the SRD, I think, is it's small, it's compact, it's easy to adapt, and in the past people have adapted it to a number of different genres. They're all kind of lost to time now, but there was a sci-fi supplement out there, a Lovecraftian supplement. In my conversation last night with Mildra, we even kicked around the idea of like a low fantasy sort of Hyperborea setting, and I think with just some really small tweaks to the existing fantasy system, you could do something like that where magic is very deadly, combat is also very deadly, just kind of that low fantasy style of play. But yeah, I think it's really easy to do, and that's something I would love to see people do today. Is just take the SRD and you know try something out with it. Like you said, gangster style play, organized crime, mafia. That's very topical because that was actually the first way I, kind of exercised the SRD after I dusted it off and put it up on the website about a month or so ago. Was, well, how quickly can I create a new genre supplement with this? And it took me just a few hours to get a functional organized crime. We're calling it the Syndicate. I'm kind of co-developing it with a mutual. I think we both have Mr. Big.
Mhm.
Highly
Yep.
highly recommend anybody listening to follow him. He's a big ideas guy, and he's given me some really neat ideas to work with. But yeah, so he initially put that bug in my ear of maybe we try like an organized crime genre, game supplement. So like I said, it just took me a couple hours to put something functional together, and I've been play testing that for the past few weeks now with my boys and my wife, and we've got a little adventure that we're running through and having a lot of fun with. But I think it kind of proves out that the SRD it works. And if there's a setting that somebody wants to see out there in the world, go ahead and make it. Make your own game, make your own happiness, or even just use TinyD10 to kind of prototype it and see if it's an idea that you like, and then build it out from the ground up there. But
Yeah, Mr. Big's in the chat.
nice.
His full name's Wayne Klickman. He's mafia expert.
True
Writes a lot
crime
of-
writer. Yep.
Writes a lot about that for folks that want to check him out. He does some UFO stuff. I remember him talking to me about a year ago, and so everybody go ahead and give him a look. Mr. Big on Twitter. So, yeah, I like that. I have the same idea. I remember the guy that's got me he was kind of a mentor with the gaming stuff. And I remember him having a whole shelf of his own systems.
Mhm.
Mostly wargaming, but here's my battalion level Napoleonics, here's my brigade Napoleonics, so on and so forth. And after going to the service and coming back and seeing him, that shelf got real. I said, where'd all the stuff go? He says, I'm old now. I don't want to remember all that stuff. I can't remember all that stuff. So I just want one thing where I can go everywhere. So that's what I've been trying to do, is just I want a system that I can play my Panzer Blitz with, and I can play my Star Wars RPG with, and not have to switch books or ideas or anything like that.
Yeah.
You meant
I
to
love
say
that
Star Trek, right?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, sorry. I couldn't resist.
But yeah, either one of those, yes. But yeah, I do like the idea of that. So that's one of the things I found attractive, that you can take it anywhere you want, because, and of course, being simple, it'll be approachable for people that are always in complaint about complexity of some of the systems and stuff like that. So
Right. Yeah, well, and that's such a funny thing, and I see you talk about it a lot, and it does get me thinking about it because complexity. It's such a subjective thing. You could really call anything complex, and I think what people mean when they say complex is what they really mean is complicated. And now I don't necessarily agree that a lot of what people say is complex is actually complicated. Again, there just has to be a certain level of rules to get a certain style of play that you want. But I think kind of the difference is there's definitely or at least there are people out there who would consider TinyD10 to have a certain level of complexity in it. Like I said, it's just it's a subjective thing. But I think where I was able to succeed with the system is not necessarily targeting complexity or whether a game is complicated or not, but just cutting down on a lot of overhead. Not that the things that aren't in the system are not necessary, but the things that don't appear to be in the system, they actually are. It was heavily inspired by, like I said, my years playing BX. And what I noticed with BX, and one of the differences between BX and some of the more modern systems, and one of the reasons that it's has such a fewer page count, is that it's very intuitive. It leans very heavily on people's understanding of fantasy settings, just how these style of games are played in general. There's a certain level of intuition that is kind of baked into the game, where it just relies on someone's understanding of these concepts. So that's something I leaned heavily into with TinyD10, is that people already have an understanding of what fantasy is, whether that's because they read a lot of Jack Vance, or because they read a lot of Tolkien, or because they read a lot of Dunze. Everybody has kind of a different flavor of fantasy, but everybody more or less understands these kind of core concepts, and so you don't really have to belabor a lot of that. And then they also have an understanding, especially at this point, of generally how role-playing games work, and just kind of like leaning into that kind of body of knowledge that people already have. It makes it so you don't have to use as many words sometimes.
Right. That's it all depends on what you're targeting. If you
Right,
want to try to
right.
get fresh people that have never done this before, you might want to start being a little bit more. It's like wargaming. I always heard somebody said there's two different types of wargamers that start out. There's the ones that were history buffs and then learned about wargaming, or became history buffs because they were doing wargaming.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
and the direction of how they interpreted everything was, opposite to one another.
Hmm.
And so you'd hand somebody, here's some rules. Oh yeah, 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 yeah. And they would get it completely like that. And then the other side, they go, what the hell? They have to have all this explanation. And it wasn't about complexity. It was just about the direction these people were learning from.
Right.
Everybody's a
Yep,
little
that
bit
makes
different.
sense.
Mm-hmm. Same thing with RPGs. So, but I don't know. There's so many people that get huffy about these mechanics, and I don't know. I see a kind of a contradiction in that as well, where people say, "Well, there's too much of this. It's too deep, too complex." And I say, "Okay, well, there's always FKR. There's always the rulings, not rulings." And then the same person will go, "Well, wait a minute. You got to have a framework to work within." Okay, you're looking at both sides of the sheet. Which one do you want to go with? So
Right.
Right.
somewhere they're missing something. Not that they're dumb and missing something,
Hmm.
but apparently they're not being fulfilled in some way.
Right. Well,
Something is
and
Right.
some people
scratching their back.
you just can't please.
Well,
Right.
there's some
That
too.
is that
Yeah.
is a truism for sure. But that brings me to the next question, actually. What is it that you want your character or your players to get out of the experience during a typical session? Like what kind of emotional engagement? Because when it comes right down to it, whatever mechanisms you're using, it's really kind of about that experience that the player walks away from the
Hmm.
table with. So what is your goal for that?
Yeah, yeah. That's a really good question. Obviously, I think everybody's goal is, they want their players to have fun. But again, fun is another very subjective term, and fun kind of manifests itself in different ways with different groups and different people. Um, so I still think, probably what I want, most out of my players, or what I want them to get most out of the game, is, is it, they had a fun time, that it was exciting, that it was, there's always got to be kind of an element of mystery. That's, something that kind of struck me, as a kid when I started to read like pulps, and specifically Edgar Rice Burroughs. Is There's always a mystery. There's always kind of something around the corner that kind of hooks you in, and draws you deeper into the story, because you want to know how it turns out. Um, that's something that I do see that is lacking in a lot of like newer adventures, newer kind of games in general. Is that kind of sense of mystery that's going to pull somebody in. So I would say, yeah, just something that people are having fun with, people are engaged with, something that people want more of. I've played this game, like I said, with my kids. I've played it with friends. I've played it with neighbors. A lot of the times, it was the first introduction that neighbors and other kind of community members ever had to tabletop role playing games. So they approach it differently. Some people are comfortable. Role playing their character. Other people like to narrate what their character does. So everybody, like I said, engages with the game on a different level. But ideally, there's something there for everybody. There's combat. People like to kill monsters. People like to loot monsters and get cool magic swords. People like to watch a narrative unfold. People like to see their influence exerted on the world that they're playing in. So yeah, I guess, you know, everybody kind of looks for something slightly different when they engage. They have a different definition of fun. But you know, giving everybody the opportunity to do what they want, like I said, whether it's killing monsters, getting, you know, cool equipment, or kind of, you know, immersing themselves in a world setting. That's really what I'd like to be able to bring to, you know, every group I run a game for.
And that's why I think of the kits, or people that refer to certain rules as more of a kit,
Hmm.
or a sandbox of itself or something, is more utilitarian, because now you've got somewhere, and I believe that what you've done is that now you can go and do what you want. You want to go play some war game, you know, do a Tony Bath type of thing, and
Hmm.
everybody's at war with one another. You can do something like that
Yeah.
with a little bit of modification. So
Hmm.
again, it's the same kind of analogy. You have the vehicle to take it to the destination that you want to, when it's your
Exactly.
fun. Yeah.
Yep.
So mhm. That's what I'd like to do with mine too. Mine is well, you know, it I guess the difference would be is mine's comes from
Hmm.
1979, you know, and that thought process and that stuff. When I look at what I'm doing, I look at something that was, you know, I found in my love, just like the mentor that I talked about. His name was Gary
Hmm.
Bloom. He did a bunch of great games, but they were friendly neighborhood local games with the uh, minimal art and the charts and the typing and all. Not that mine can be laid out that way. You got to make it pretty for people,
Right. Right.
but it's got a little bit more of that old school feel as far as reading the rules and things like that. It's amazing how that can be considered complex, and how that can affect people's thought process. I was just doing a video for Panzer Blitz. This is one of my personal favorites. I was looking at two setups for weather rules. They weren't all that dissimilar in concept,
Hmm.
but one was printed in the early 60s and one was printed in the early 70s. And the structure and the layout and coloring of the older rules made them look like they stunk. They made them look like they were more complex than they really were. And they
Hmm.
were less appealing to the majority of players, as I recall talking about it some 20 years after the fact. And nothing wrong with them. If you analyze them, they make perfect sense. But people look
Right.
at it and go, yeah, that doesn't look very fun. It looks like stereo instructions. I don't want to play that. You know, so sometimes it's all about. It took me a long time as a designer to care about layout, because I never did. I just wanted to
Right.
read it and get onto the board and play it. But if you want to sell it to people, it's got to look a certain way too. So
Yeah, yeah, you're absolutely right about that. And you know, and I don't know if this is the case in, you know, your particular example there, but something else I noticed too is people will just, and people have always been like this, but people will just believe what everybody else believes. They'll say what
Right.
everybody else says, you know, even if they never looked at the rule set. If somebody tells them that this game is complex, then they will say, "Oh, okay, well, this game is complex," you know, and that's something hard to
it's
fight
true.
against. And I think you do fight against it with good design. I think that would be a
Yeah.
really effective way to kind of counter the claim that something is just too complex, too complicated. But I mean, yeah, you will hear that to a certain extent, because you know people just say what everybody else says.
Yeah,
Yep.
it's
You
and
know,
that's. Go ahead, Richard.
oh, sorry. But my perspective on that, I think where I come from on it is as a kind of relatively new player, because I also got into, like, I always wanted to play when I was younger, but I didn't
Mhm.
have an audience to play with.
Me
So
too.
it was
Yep.
kind of, yeah, just circumstances of where I was. But once I did get a chance to start playing, I think for me, what determines complexity or a game that's fun, the difference between the two is, and I don't think complexity is really the right word, but that's what everybody's chosen to use. So I'm going to go with it, you know. But if the rules get in the way of the experience, that's where you're running. And if you can't enjoy yourself because you're like,
Mhm.
I don't get it,
Right.
that's when you have a problem. So if
Yeah,
you're
and you're totally right. And you know, I don't think that's complexity so much as it is bad design. And we do see a
right,
lot of that today. We do see just a lot of bad design in games today.
Mhm, mhm. It,
right,
and some of it can be, you know, I've tried to get people to explain, to understand this too. Back in the 70s and 80s, I don't know why, but none of these companies wanted to hire an editor.
Mhm.
I mean, they may have, but they weren't hiring quality, because there was some things. It wasn't about the concept being difficult, but the word salad of the sentence, you're just
Right.
looking at that. Like, what
Just
the hell
not
does that mean?
clear.
Yeah. And people will just go, well, it's a complicated set of rules. Well, wait till they put out the addendum and then it'll clarify it for you and stuff like that.
Mhm.
But that perception, and again, the layout. There was a game called Panzer, was made in 1980. Everybody hated it. Oh, there's too much. That's just too hardcore and all that. And it was printed on some really bad paper. Like it was a bright green and it was like gave you a headache to look at it. And the print
Right.
was so small and all that. And then they remade it and it was giant print, full color and everything. They didn't change hardly any rules. And everybody's like, see, when you revise it and make it a modern thing, there was nothing like it was the same thing from 1980. It just looked
Right.
pretty.
Right.
Everybody
Yeah.
loved
Yeah.
it.
It matters.
Yeah,
Mhm.
it can make a difference. So I wanted to ask you something, and just I feel free to answer in whatever way you're comfortable with. What's the most surprising thing that's ever happened when you've run a game?
Oh, that's a really good question. Um, well, so I think probably what is most surprising to me, and it's not directly related to running a game, but like I said, I'm kind of kind of a private person. I'd like to think that I'm friendly and approachable, but I just do have a tendency to keep to myself. But it seemed over the past 10 years that I've been doing this, somehow or another, people find out, friends find out, neighbors find out that, I made a role playing game and they want to play it. And a lot of them have never played role playing games. A lot of them, I'm like, I don't think you would have fun. And I try to talk them out of it. And everybody who I finally let them talk me into sitting down and playing a game, they've had a blast. Especially the people who I think like I don't think it's for you. I don't think you like tabletop role playing games. So that's probably been the biggest surprise for me is so many people like to play this way. And again, it has a lot to do with the fact that people engage in different ways. They engage in the first person and the third person. They treat it, like a story. They treat it like almost a little bit more like a war game. But everybody is really capable of getting what they want out of a game. And so, I've just been so surprised at just the variety of people who have had a lot of fun just sitting down and doing silly fantasy stuff.
I think that there's a lot of people that would that playing a tabletop game of any sort is what they really want to do is they want to be 10 years old again. But
Yeah, totally.
if you're 52 years old and you start acting like a 10-year-old, people start wanting to put you in some sort of
Right.
therapy. So the rules are the way to keep it adult, even when you don't want to keep it adult. And I think that's
Very
why a lot of
true.
people go, I just want 3 or 4 rules and I want to just riff with a bunch of people because they just want to play make believe. And that's cool. I'm a big Fred Rogers fan. Play make believe. I enjoy it.
Hmm.
And I think that there's nothing wrong with just sitting down. Rob Kuntz, he says, really all you need is something for combat if you're going to do combat, and
Yep.
something to generate, some sort of random generator. If it's somebody like me trying to make a free throw at the line, your
Hmm.
chances are pretty slim. It ain't going to happen for sure. It's certainly not going to fail every time either. So there's
Right.
your random determination for that. Everything else is just playing off of somebody.
Yeah,
And
yeah, you're totally right about that. And I do say in the rules too, I emphasize heavily, like the most fun you're going to have is when you role play situations. Really, the only time you need to roll a die or you need the rules is when you try to do something that could result in failure. Otherwise, yeah, the story, the game, the experience, the events as they unfold, they're just going to move along simply by you interacting with each other in the world.
And that it really is the easiest way to do it. It just gets
Mhm.
people. I like the FKR because I tell people, some of the war game guys I tried to explain this to, they didn't get it. They go, how can you play a game without rules? It's not that you're playing without rules. I want to sit you down and forget about rules. You're a new player.
Mhm.
We did this with Magenta. Her first thing was, well, I don't know anything about the Star Wars game and all that. Well, here's 2 basics. Here's how you shoot at people, and here's how you check for skills. Everything
Mhm.
else will just tell you as you
Yeah,
play.
totally.
And
I also
uh,
learned how to die, early on. That
Very,
happened.
very important
And then
skill to
yes.
develop.
but that way it because she said I'd love to do it, but then you hand her the book and she goes, well, wait a minute, that sounds like a college course. So you just kill the overhead
Mhm.
completely or the player workload. Now all you got to worry about is making interesting decisions.
Yep,
And the
that's
more of that
exactly it.
Yeah, and the more of the DM that can do the record keeping and all that, if there is any needed, the better. So
Hmm.
I want to cover David Brown has a question. I'll cover that real quick. He asks, uh, I haven't read the rules yet, but I'm assuming it uses D10 instead of D20 as the primary die. Is everything with a D10, or do you use other types of die faces too?
Yeah, it's just a D10. You will encounter situations where it calls for a D5, but I mean, obviously we know how that one works. 1 through 5 being 1 through 5, and 6 through 10 also being 1 through 5. But yeah, I try to keep it simple, just because I like the idea of just being able to play a game with what you've got in your pocket. That was kind of another idea. There is the rules are simple enough to where you don't have to refer to them. After you've played a few times, you're typically going to, within the first few sessions, encounter every situation where you need to refer back to the rules. Otherwise, the idea is you go on a road trip. If you've got a flat or semi-flat surface, you can roll a die that you keep in your pocket, and that's pretty much that. So yep, just D10. Everything is base 10, and yeah, that's pretty much where it sits there.
All right, we have Ultra American TTRPG.
Hey, I
Or,
know that guy.
I refer to him as Reverend Bob, the Kool-Aid fan. It's a long.
Nice.
He got he. It's
I
a
get
whole
part
thing.
of that joke.
It's a whole thing with Shadow, Dark, and all that. But he asks, could Syndicate be used for a biker gang?
Oh yeah, absolutely, and that's a really good question. So yeah, you could absolutely use a biker gang or any other style of gang that you wanted to put in there. What you would do for that is, I think, again, with the way the classes are designed, the classes are re-implemented from the traditional archetypes that we find across all Western literature over the past centuries. So you've got clever people, you've got wise people, you've got strong people, you've got fast people, and the classes in Syndicate reflect that as well. You've got enforcers, smugglers, schemers, um, and they each map to that kind of traditional archetype. So really, all you'd have to do is put a family in, which is the stand-in for the race. So the Syndicate right now has Chinese triads, Irish mob, Italian mafia, and Russian bratva. So you would just add an extra family, give them kind of like an overarching, characteristics that would reflect sort of nationality, ethnic origin, cultural propensities, and then add them into the classes of, like I said, enforcer, smuggler, and that would pretty much be it. So yeah, the biker gang would come in the in the race flavor. It would be the family. I think would probably be where you see it kind of exert the most influence as to how bikers are, what they do, and what kind of attributes they might have.
Um, right, right. Have you looked into mass combat rules?
Only recently, just because I've seen a lot of talk about that. Another thing that's really interested me. So first of all, I've only been on Twitter since November,
Mhm.
but there are just so many like sharp people with really great ideas on Twitter. I have the best mutuals, of course. I think you and I have good overlap, so we've got the best mutuals. We really do. But there's so many sharp people with so many neat ideas, and I've been exposed, to a lot of really cool things that I'd never considered before. I've been just kind of, operating in a bubble here for many years now. So kind of joining the internet in a way that is more than just reading things on it. I've seen rules for domain play, which is a really intriguing idea. I've seen rules for mass combat, and like I said, TinyD10 it's a modular system. So I am kind of kicking around ideas of how I could boil something like that down and plug it into the system as well to facilitate epic mass scale battles that I've never done with any of my players before.
Hmm. Hmm. What do you look? What are you looking at? Like a percentile dice system or anything
Yeah,
like?
I think that makes the most sense there because
Mhm.
you could still run it off a D10 that way, and just roll it twice.
Right, right. I've decided to. The whole probability curve thing shouldn't matter, especially in combat.
Hmm.
Combat's chaos. There's always people trying to invoke the Clausewitzian theory of friction
Hmm.
when they bring up games and stuff like what the and a lot of that is people. Magenta's got those guys pinned down though. They like the luck versus the skill because that way, if they lose, they can always blame the bad roll instead of the good move. But
Right.
It keeps the peace too, and it keeps your friendships because at the end of the game, you still want to be friends with the people you played with, right?
Right.
so,
Right.
but that swinginess doesn't matter when you have that chaos. So, and it makes it real easy for everybody just to go, well, here's your chances of success and all that to keep it without having to bend over backwards with mathematical formulas and stuff like that. So,
Right. Right.
stuck with the D10 with a percentile.
Yep. I
So,
do like that.
well, that's great. How about technology and all that? How are you going to plug in that kind of stuff when you talk about shooting lasers at ships or something like that?
Yeah, that's something I haven't considered too much. I'm not huge into sci-fi.
Mm,
I've been kind of, I and it probably shows in my system. It's a tiny little thing that I've been working on. It's been my main creative focus for the past like 10 years. I just kind of pick one thing, and then I wouldn't say obsess, but I do hyper focus on it. So my literary tastes are very, very specific. So yeah, I haven't really like gotten too much into sci-fi. I think probably the most immersion I've had is with Heinlein, and then with some of Herbert's other books outside of Dune. I've read all the Dune books, and I really enjoyed them.
Yeah.
But a lot of it had to do with, it's kind of like a low fantasy, low tech. Actually, it's very low tech. The
mhm,
Butlerian jihad and everything.
right.
But that's why I like Dune. But Herbert has some other good, short stories and novellas as well, that are, kind of more on the sci-fi side, that, I do still really enjoy. But I'm open to sci-fi. I just haven't found something to like suck me into it yet.
I'm a Star Wars fanatic. I
Mhm.
I've been to every Star Wars. I went to the original premiere in my area for Star Wars back in the
Nice.
70s. I was taken there by my uncle who says, this is going to mean something. This is something big. I can feel it. And he chaperoned me at the age of 9 to go down there and check it out. I've seen everyone since. So I just
And man,
literally,
he was right.
oh, yeah, he was really good. Got some good foresight. So it was great that he took me down there and saw that. So I love the Star Wars. Twitter, I don't know what happened a couple years ago. Everybody sci-fi just kind of dried up and stopped talking about it. It's
Mhm.
very hard to find, especially the Star Wars stuff. But I do enjoy that very much. So I always look at people that are doing that sort of thing. But everybody's got their niche. That's cool. I started with D&D in as far as RPG goes. Same uncle was
Mhm.
working with TSR back in the day
Oh,
from
very
start.
cool.
Yeah. So I went to this. This is how I started with D&D. I'd heard the name, but I'd never seen any of this stuff. And I was over there at my uncle's house. My dad goes over to visit every Saturday, and they're sitting down having their beers and smoking their cigarettes. They go get me a beer, boy. And I go down there, and he had a bunch of Rogues Gallery and a bunch of other stuff laying on his table. And I says, "Hey, what's that? That looks like games, man." Says, "Oh yeah, I've been working with them. Do you know about that?" And I says, "Well, I've heard the words." And he says, "Yeah, I've got it." And he took me down there, and he had the miniatures and a whole bunch of stuff. He says, "Do you like this stuff?" And I says, "Well, yeah, I'll give it a try." So he started bringing me TSR products off the line till it was Watsy.
That's too
Wow.
cool.
That is
Bring me
cool.
everything until second edition. I said, you know what? I really would prefer they bought up SPI, and I'm a big war gamer. So I says,
Mhm.
start bringing me the SPI stuff that they're redoing. So after that, he did that. But I got everything all the way up first edition.
That's
The whole
too cool.
nine
You
yards.
probably still have a lot of that, don't you?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I do. I have it
Nice,
in an
nice.
archive. Yeah, some of it's seen better days, but I have it in the archives, and I'm sitting on it as a nest egg because I don't have much else in the way of savings. So I stick with
Well, you're sitting on gold, man, so you're
yeah,
good.
yeah. So that's was my start with that sort of stuff. So
Very
and
cool.
yeah, that was the origin story. But so I do like the fantasy, but I really am a big sci-fi guy. So I always go, hey, what are you gonna do with sci-fi? But that's understandable. You can't be a jack of all trades. You got to be a
Right.
master of some or something. Is that
Exactly. Yep. I could try my hand at it, but what informs, and I think what kind of accelerates development, specifically using the system, is because it's so archetypal. It's built off of, like I said, the kind of core features and functions of Western literature over the past several centuries. Is it works really well to know the tropes.
Right.
So somebody who likes sci-fi, I invite them to give it a stab, pick up the SRD, and like I said, I bet they could have a playable game in a few hours.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, I wanted to mention you because I had it on my list of things to ask you about, other influences that you had when, bringing up the game to life. But you mentioned a couple times Edgar Rice Burroughs, and I was kind of shocked to hear that because not too many people have read him. I was obsessed for probably a good, I don't know, probably from the time I was 11 to 14 with
Mhm.
reading like every one of the books I could get my hands on. And I just thought that was unique because I never hear anybody else as being talk about being a fan of his
Yeah,
work.
which I think is crazy, because first of all, he's a phenomenal writer and so
Yeah,
prolific, and that's if I had to have one complaint about Robert E. Howard, it's that I've read all of his work. There's nothing else to read anymore, but I'm still finding new stuff from Burroughs. I mean, there's like what 26 installments in the Tarzan series,
yeah,
and I've only read like 10 of them, and I've read all of them to the boys, but Burroughs, and specifically his Tarzan series, is my wife's favorite book. And yeah, we're just huge Burroughs fans. Like I said, he's so prolific, so imaginative, and he kind of develops his own universe, and you see kind of these recursive themes in his work,
yeah.
and it's very fun to pick those things out. But yeah, I just love Burroughs.
Mhm. Mhm. Part of Appendix N, if I recall correctly.
It
And
is, yeah, and I've got my own tiny little appendix. It's Appendix C for TinyD10, and Burroughs is in there along with Algernon Blackwood, which is also in Appendix N, and then Howard too, of course. Got to put him in there.
mhm. Yeah. All right. David Brown asks, do you have any YouTube or other platform videos, playthrough, example of game?
Yeah, I don't, and I've thought about that, because we play it so much at my house, and I've thought about maybe putting something together for the syndicate specifically, because I've got an adventure that we've been play testing and playing through, and it's been going really well, and everybody's having a blast. But I hear, I guess, people have kind of talked me out of doing YouTube stuff because I know it's a lot of work. There's a lot of editing, there's a lot of technology that goes into it, and so I haven't given it serious consideration yet.
The thing with YouTube, like turning this thing on and just chatting with people is great and very interesting.
Mhm.
I've tried to put together a playthrough of Panzer Blitz. That's going to be 2 weeks.
Bro,
Get,
I believe it.
yeah, it's just in every little thing. And like the one thing I spent 10 minutes just giving an intro and my tongue twisted. I trip over a pronunciation or
Hmm.
something like that. And then I'd have to, I mean, you can edit that stuff, but it is tedium,
Yeah,
personified. So
I totally believe it.
yeah. Um, and now I've heard a rumor, and it's only a rumor, but I've heard a rumor that YouTube is cracking down on independent RPG people anyway because they don't feel that it's monetizing their product enough. So they're turning us down.
Oh,
That's what I've heard. Yeah,
Oh,
interesting.
that's a
yeah,
shame.
yeah. It really is. But there are alternatives out there if you're a fan of that. I'm gonna just keep throwing everything at every platform that I can find and hope for the best. And if some whittle away or whatever, then there it is. But
Right. Yeah.
but it does. I understand if you listen to it in depth and detail, the person that explains it, looking from their perspective, I can understand why they're doing it. That doesn't make anybody like me any happier about it, but I get it. So
Right.
another thing to think about. Let's see what else we got for people. Other keep trying to get. Me and other couple other guys are trying to get a game going. We keep facing one enemy scheduling conflict. Oh yeah, that's the other thing. Trying to play on. I always thought the internet was going to unite all this stuff, and in a
Hmm.
lot of ways, it's categorized it, it's splintered it, and the idea
Right.
that it's going to make playing more feasible really hasn't panned out so well. Although I've
Yeah.
had,
Well, it turns out people are still busy,
yeah.
and
Right.
maybe even busier than ever, honestly.
Mhm.
Mm.
Yeah, and that's part of it more than the because if you don't have people around playing on something like what we're doing right now is easily done. You can just start playing a game. Now everybody's here.
Right.
We hear each other. You can see each other. It works great as far as convenience, but like people say, and that's another one of those things with complexity and complaints about some of these older games that kind of get me because I understand you're busy, and
Hmm.
I understand that people have a responsibility. But if you don't have enough time to watch a feature film, that doesn't necessarily mean that the average feature film is too long.
Right. That's a
You
good
know,
point. Yep.
but they'll tell you, "Oh, I can never play that game. I never get it finished." Well, how much time you got? You know, we jumped into a game like Europa, which was a war game, understanding that this wasn't going to be a sitcom's worth of play. This
Right.
thing is huge. You know, we leave it up in the basement and play it for some weeks and stuff like that.
Hmm.
So, what else we got here? Yeah, I was going to say, if you're looking for a way to play this through, and you don't want to invest in a lot of character or cameras and stuff like that, Wayne and friends have put together a charity game, and maybe they'll put in another one for you. They were playing a goblin versus human thing.
Yeah, yeah, Gobstein. I actually, I drew the map for that. I'm not sure if they're still using it, but yeah, I kind of worked with the guys in there to come up with the continent on which Gobstein unfolds. And
Yeah,
yes, yeah, I've been tracking that whole thing. I love to watch it. It's super fun to see, these things just kind of develop in real time out in the open. And then obviously it's for a great cause, for donations to St. Jude's. So yeah, good game, great cause. Yeah, I've been watching that one very closely.
I was thinking maybe something where you take uh, kind of that north side, south side Chicago thing, the Irish versus the Italians, and
Hmm.
change it to the humans versus the goblins and give them all a bunch of Tommy guns and
Yep, yep.
some old
I saw
Cadillac
some
sedans.
AI images floating around to that effect this
Yeah,
morning, and
yeah,
I got such a kick out of that.
yeah. That might be fun to try that out. So,
Totally.
um, yeah, but that's Magenta. How's the list going? You got anything more? You probably
Well,
do.
yeah, actually. So is there anything, Aaron, in your game that where you left gray space or like just an open kind of like left it for the up to the players to decide where what the rules would be, just kind of open ended, I guess would be another way to put that.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. In fact, it's definitely baked into the system. The introduction says something to the effect of, if there's not a rule, make one up and stick to it. It doesn't matter how complex you make your system. House rules always emerge. It's a feature of emergent play. So like I said, the advice there is, just make one up, stick to it. Whatever fits that group style of play is obviously going to keep the game moving. That's really what it's all about. And then at the end of the book, in fact, let me just reach back here real quick if I can without unplugging myself. This is our much loved print copy here. And it's all marked up. I'm actually in the process of getting this back online. It's a print on demand. So within the next couple of weeks, I'm hoping to have it back online, and then I want to do like a little giveaway on Twitter. But that's kind of future stuff. But right here at the end of the book, there's a couple pages. They're dedicated to house rules, and the words are probably backwards. But yeah, so like I said, it's very much a feature of the system. It's very baked into it. Maybe specifically where that might be. Some of the more tactical style of play. It's kind of that more theater of mind approach. So it's not grid based, although it could very easily be played on a grid. But those are things that you probably would have to like come up with some rules for. Something I noticed when working on the syndicate is I don't have rules for cover and concealment in ranged combat. There's obviously lots of ranged combat in fantasy. The vast majority of ranged combat, in a mob style organized crime game, vast majority of combat is going to be ranged. But again, that's something people can intuit. You know how cover works. You know how concealment works. The risk that you're presenting when you pop your head out to take a shot. You're inviting a retaliatory attack or an attack of opportunity. So it's things that they're not on the lines necessarily, but they're probably in between them. And you can really lean on player intuition and people's understandings of just how a shootout looks in a movie, to kind of play that out.
One of the things that I just had a conversation with somebody, and they back to the complexity thing, but adding rules like this because it matters.
Mhm.
If you want to, it's one thing to have some imagination. Like I tell you, here's how it worked with me when I started with wargaming. It was like a Folgers commercial. I was out there with 4 kids, and we were playing the sandbox with old Mark's toy soldiers, and we would set them up into little dioramas, and that looked cool. But then that got boring. We kept looking at, well, what if these things were remote control? We could move them or something like that. Well, we couldn't do that. So we started making narratives. We started making movies. We wanted to
Hmm.
borrow my uncle's Super 8, which is an old mechanical.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And he says, that was $4,000. You're not touching that, boy. But, but so we were going to just put on like a little play type of thing. Well, the problem was you had all Chiefs and no Braves, and everybody wanted to tell their story. And my tank's not blowing up. Your tank's blowing up.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it got into a fight. Well, anyway, the point is that, so what happened was the guy came out and he gave me a war game rules. He says, I see you boys fighting out here. And, here you go. He was visiting my dad and he saw us fighting in the backyard and he says, this might help out.
They need some rules.
Yeah, they need to. And so we went and used their rules, but we wanted everything to play out in somewhat of a realistic manner.
Mhm.
And if you don't consider certain things, they don't play out even if your idea of realism is just like you say, watching the shootout on the local, Crime Stoppers show or whatever it is.
Yep.
If you don't consider these things, then it won't play out and it won't be interesting for you. It won't be satisfying. Well, how would I die if I'm sitting behind that Cadillac sedan's door? That thing weighs 2 tons in and of itself. You're not shooting through that. So you got to add these sort of things in. So when I talk about realism, then people start going, complexity, simulation. No, I'm not talking about, getting down there and doing, metallurgy analysis of the thing. I'm saying if you hide behind something, it's going to be harder for you to hit. So it's just a matter of, it's not that big of a deal to add a little something in to make a little flavor and have it play out a little bit better.
Yeah, yeah, you're absolutely right about that.
And but if you have a bunch of folks that, in an SRD like you set up where people can just come up with their own, there you go. Now you can decide what matters to you.
Yep.
Maybe
exactly.
Maybe
Yep. And you can plug those rules in. It's nice and easy.
That's the best way. That's what I'm looking to do as well. It's a great
I like it.
David Brown says any war game we ran as kids ended up with fire. Right. That was it. And that was another reason everybody was very happy when Mr. Myers and Mr. Zimmerman came out and gave us those things, because before that, we were doing exactly that. Firecrackers wrapped around the plastic guys and shooting bottle rockets and stuff.
Which is fun, but even that gets boring.
Yeah. And or then we had the neighbor come out and he says, see how I only have 3 fingers on this hand? Because I was doing what you kids were doing. And so we got that kind of safety briefing out of it. But yeah, that was always a lot of fun. So yeah, I do enjoy the modular systems. That's kind of what I'm looking at too. So here's another thing that comes up I think about now. You're not charging, everything's free, which is great. That's a great service to I had somebody say something one time. I asked, while I'm making the system I'm making, I start wondering, there's a lot of people making these. There's a lot of people that are making them saying they're not making a lot of money off of this. And I said, but here's the thing. Why are people keep making these? And one of the replies I got, which was a little cliche from several people, was, well, some people like to create. Okay, well, that's fair. I had an uncle that would just whittle stuff out and then he would put it on his workbench. He didn't sell it or show it to anybody. It just sat there. That's fine. Are you looking at trying to commercialize at one point? Where are you looking at as far as expansion, if any?
Yeah, that's a good question. I haven't really given that a lot of thought. Again, connecting with Wayne and working on the syndicate. I think the idea with this is that eventually, once we wrap it up here, he wants to put it into one of the backs of his books. I think the book is called The Associate. So just kind of, give it as bonus material for some of his true crime work. And I think that's a really neat idea. But yeah, as far as, monetization, commercialization, the system is released under a Creative Commons license. So, anybody who would want to use it, even for commercial purposes, is totally free. The license is open. I really like open licensing in general. So I understand that it takes a lot of effort to monetize something. And Whether I'm willing, well, I know that I'm not willing to put that amount of effort in. And I think, that's a lot of what it comes down to too, is, even if I were interested in, some kind of commercial aspect, or, monetizing the game somehow, that's a whole lot of effort. And I just, I've got 5 kids, full-time job, I've got, a lot of things just soaking up that very limited free time that I have anyway. So, it's not in the cards for me right now. And if I ever did, monetize it, I would always have, a free PDF copy of it. I think, once when I decided to, put the game up on the internet after, me and the boys have been playing it for a couple of years. I did it just because I wanted to, I saw a lot of people contributing things to this community. I think it's a great community, and I wanted to contribute something too. So this is my contribution. It's, just a gift to anybody who wants to pick it up. So it will always be free, even if I do, find the time and the desire to, make some money off of it. That being said, eventually, like I said, I'll get this print-on-demand book back up, and unfortunately, I can't give that away because that would cost me money. But I will do like a little giveaway. Like I said, I'll figure something out on Twitter where we give 5 copies away to people. But otherwise, yeah, people will eventually be able to buy that, and there might be a little overhead there, but yeah, ultimately it's just, what I get the most out of this is hearing people, say, I gave it a shot and I liked it. I love to hear that.
That's
Right.
great. That's
I
great.
wanted to ask you too. You brought up your boys a few times, and just what age did you start getting them involved, and what do you think is a good age for kids generally to kind of explore these kinds of games?
Yeah, yeah. So my boys, just the 2 back then, they were 4 and 5, and I think that age was perfect. Because they
Mhm.
had kind of shown interest in it at that point. I'd go away to a friend's house for the evening, and they're like, "Where are you going?" So I tell them what we're doing, and they're intrigued by that. That was right around the time that I think I showed them the animated Lord of the Rings series from, I think,
Oh,
back in the 80s, and they were just
yeah.
totally enamored by that. And I'd also read them The Hobbit right around that age, so they were very
Awesome.
immersed in fantasy. So they're right at that age where I think they got the concept of like, this is just like make believe, like we always do, but there are some rules to get a little bit more out of the play. So I think 4 and 5 is a really good age, and I don't know if you could do it younger. You could certainly try it because, again, kids' minds are just geared towards make believe. But they do have to reach a certain point where they're like, okay, well, if I follow some rules, I'll get more out of it. There
Yeah.
is kind of like a watershed there for childhood development.
Yeah. That, series you mentioned, the animated series of Lord of the Rings, that was my daughter's very first favorite series of anything. She was about 3
Nice.
years old when she discovered them and just would watch them over and over again, and this was when there were a lot of other options out there, but she
Hmm.
still, I mean, that was her go-to. She was also born a Beatles fan. I'm not sure how that happened, but not
That
that
is
I
funny.
mean, I love the Beatles too, but I wasn't like a no fandom going on. She just picked it
Right.
up and
She just had the
just
song
fell
in her
in.
heart.
Yeah, she used to tell me she'd hear it on the radio and she'd go, "Oh, that's the Beatles." I know. She could recognize their sound, so
Well, they had that distinctive sound.
very
So,
Yep.
distinctive,
Yep.
yep. But her 2 favorite things to watch were the Lord of the Rings, the cartoon series, and,
Hmm.
the Beatles Help, the movie Help. She loved
Yeah,
that
I've
movie.
seen that one. That is too funny. Very eclectic taste. I like that.
Yes.
um, so when you're not playing this, what do you play? What's some of the other games that you cut your teeth on and enjoyed in the
Yeah,
past?
that's a good question. So like I said, for tabletop role playing games, it was primarily, I got started with 4E, and then went over to BX, and played BX a few times with the boys. But that was years ago, so it's been quite a while since we picked up another, tabletop role playing game. But we do play, board games, just kind of, random off the wall stuff. One that I really like to recommend to everybody is called Bonanza. Have you ever heard of that one?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so we love Bonanza, the bean farming game. That one's super fun. So we'll play that one a lot with people who are like less inclined to tabletop games, just
Mhm.
because it's quick to pick up. It's very fast paced. My dad hates games, like just won't even play like a card game. But when he was last out visiting, we had him sit down and play it, and he pretended like he didn't like it the whole time. But even he had fun. So Yeah, like I said, as far as role playing games, we mostly just stick to TinyD10. In part just because it's our system. It's the kids have kind of helped me to shape it as much as I put my own influence into it. But yeah, when we're not playing that, we've got a whole closet that's just overflowing with tabletop and board games.
That's great. Yeah. Um, I have quite a collection myself over the years, but I guess when it was the youngsters, I had a younger cousin, my uncle's daughter Catherine. We played Fantasy Forest, which was a TSR release, and that was for the younger folks. That was kind of what was supposed to start people up on it, young
Okay.
kids. And uh, when I started playing, I played with peers my own age, and as they start to advance and start to get their own children, I started to see that copies of those things show up because they all of a sudden all my friends start having kids and such, and they want to play with that. And it was I don't even remember what the game was really about, other than it was a romp through a forest, and it had some child appropriate conflict.
Right.
Like there was also one, and I wish I had a copy of it. It was one of the few things that didn't make it to survive. There was a D&D game about the D&D, a board game about the cartoon.
Oh, neat. Okay.
And I would have loved to have one of those, but they didn't survive all the moves and stuff like that. But yeah, it had the dungeon master and the evil opponent. I forget his name and all that.
Venture, was it?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
yeah. Single horn. Yeah, had all of that. Yeah, that was some of the stuff that my uncle had worked on, and I got.
That's cool. That's cool.
Yeah.
I like that. Yeah, I've many years ago, I ran the boys through the D&D TV show from the 80s. But these days, my 3-year-old especially is loving the Conan the Barbarian show. I think it was like a 1992 the animated series.
Yeah.
And it's very fun, and you can see it took a lot of influence, from, I guess, in a formulaic sense, from that D&D TV series, the cartoon. But yeah, that one's a lot of fun. The kids love that. It's just totally action packed. Like they don't make TV like that anymore.
That's true. That's great. That's another thing about these kinds of open systems that have a generic type of. You can go and do that. I think it's in some ways it's neat that they're making a GI Joe RPG, but me and the Wallet can't keep up with all of that.
Right.
And I want to play Thunder the Barbarian, the RPG, without having to buy Thunder the RPG.
Right. Yeah. Just make your own.
And this stuff works great for that. That sandbox system can really make things work great for you. So
totally.
Yeah. So obviously you have a personal meaning connection to it. I have a couple too. The war game that those fellas handed me, I'll always remember and always look at fondly. I'll never get anybody to play it though, but they'll look at it and go, "Oh, too complicated." But it's got that nostalgic value. I always laughed at that guy going in and pull. I didn't know what he was coming out for. I thought he was going to come out and yell at us for fighting, and I didn't realize who he was until he literally went into his coat pocket and pulled the thing out.
Awesome. Iconic. That's just a Chad move right there.
Right.
Pulling games out of your jacket.
Turns out he was the creator. Names was Zimmerman and Myers, both David Zimmerman and Gene Myers. And they made quite a few war games, and they started some war game clubs in Milwaukee and stuff like that. They printed out of Sheboygan. I didn't know that they were, but yeah, the guy actually came back to give us that. He was visiting my dad as a business associate at our house.
Too cool.
It's just like a here, I've got the perfect thing for you, like it was some commercial. So those are always have that sentimental value there. So, but I think it's neat that you stick to everything. It shows that the system is got longevity, replayability, and it can stretch across any genre that you want in order to play it. So that's what I like.
Yep.
About
we've had good years with it for sure.
That's great. All right, Magenta, you still there? You didn't fall.
Well, yeah, and I have some questions too, because I always play the same character when I play D&D. In fact, Storm has had to kind of school me on, you really need to stretch your wings, because I'm always going to be an elf hunter every time.
That's too funny. I'm the same way though. It's human fire for me all the way.
Right. So, what about like? Do your kids always play? Do they have like a preference? Do you have a warrior and fighter or magic user? Or,
Yeah, they love to mix it up, just
uh,
because with each class, obviously it performs a different function. They're again being OSR inspired, which itself was inspired by the battlefield functions, artillery, infantry, etc. Each class has kind of a core function that it performs in a combat sense, and then of course there are it's kind of a gradient within those classes of how you want to play those. But they really do just kind of support like a specific tactical function. So they like to mix it up, and try out new tactics. And the game is really made more tactical in a lot of ways, by class abilities.
mhm.
Those kind of shake out into an active ability or a passive ability. Active abilities are kind of more combat oriented. You can spend power points to do whatever the abilities enable as per the class. Like the cleric class has words of strength where you can utter an invocation that'll grant attribute bonuses to your allies. The warriors have a defensive rush where they can rush to the aid of an ally and prevent a successful attack. Things like that. But again, like I said, even within that, you have clerics who can be more combat oriented, or more healing oriented. So they like to mix it up, just so that, like I said, they get that full kind of tactical spread, and they get to engage in different kinds of strategy, and just kind of play the gamut.
Hmm.
That's great. Yeah, I guess I'm gonna have to take Storm's advice and spread my wings a little bit and kind of try some other
It
classes.
is good advice. Like I said,
We're-
I wouldn't take it, but it is good advice.
Yes.
I set my system up so it puts people in a position where they will not. It doesn't take choice completely away from them, but
Mhm.
it does set you up where you might be trying something a little bit different for various reasons. I added in a kind of a life path, point buy, and random all into one to give you this. You're never going to play the same thing twice, even if you want to.
Neat.
Yeah, they
That's
have.
a fun idea. I like that.
It
Yeah,
Well,
is actually when we created a character with that, I was really surprised at how satisfying it was to go through and have because if you just ask me, I just get one track mind. I'm the kind of person too. I go to the Chinese food place. I always order the same meal every single time. I'm going to
yep,
get the
yep.
same thing. But this really kind of makes you break out of that shell because you have, one character may have a propensity that would lead them to be a magic user or
Mhm.
cleric or something like that, versus another one that's going to be like, oh, this one's definitely a barbarian. There's no, whatever,
Right.
um, because it just wouldn't make sense to try and fit them into the other mold. So,
mm,
Yeah, that's
yeah.
a really neat idea. I like that. And we know too that people are happier with fewer choices. So you take that just one step further and make a few choices for them. I think that's a really neat idea.
The other thing that I did with it is it gives you a background that is limited, and it has relevance within play. That way, because I hear so many people that are DMs going, "Oh man," and I've had it too, where some guys like, "Here's 3 pages of my character content,"
Read
and
all of it.
yeah, and it's a mini
Yeah.
novel, and it's like, oh, geez. So this way you
with the
have
conclusion being, I am going to be the most awesome player
right.
without a very little work.
Right. And those are
Right.
always the people who die earliest, and then they're very upset about it. And it's understandable. You put a lot of work into that character. I've seen people saying that you should make your players do a push up for every word of their backstory, and I think that's great advice.
So that sounds like the military school I went with. That would be the kind of thing they do. Oh yeah, but yeah, that we do like to do that. That way, it keeps a little bit. It's neat to try different classes, especially if they have, like you say, powers that play off of one another, like you're
Hmm.
talking about. That way, you can experiment with what works best. Um, Now, do they know the story that they're going to play before they make the characters so that you can like
No, no. I like to keep it. I like to keep my wife knows a little bit because I like to bounce ideas off her. So she can, sometimes, with that kind of peek behind the screen, she can help them make good decisions, or at least keep themselves out of trouble that they can't handle. But yeah, otherwise, yeah, I like to keep them totally in the dark, just to kind of see how they adapt to the situation, and that's very much what I'm doing with the Island of the Ape Men. They know very little bit about the setting, and again, part of that is because there are those mysteries that draw you in, and I really want to kind of see that unfold with them. But also because, yeah, I like to keep them on their toes. It's fun to watch them scramble and try to figure things out in real time.
That's what I did. I was playing a Greyhawk deal, and I campaigned with OD&D, and I had a couple of modifications. And one that really didn't make people happy was I made them stick to one particular spell,
Mhm.
no matter what. And they said that's not how it really works. There was going to be a reason for why that happened. We never got that far. Unfortunately, it fell apart. But I like the idea of not telling people a lot. They didn't know what was going
Yeah.
on. They could just discover it for themselves. And if you don't have privy to what you're going to face, and how are you going to deal with fighting something when you were prepared to fight something else?
Right.
Make
Yeah.
them
Absolutely.
think through it. I liked that.
Exactly. Be ready for anything.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
What do you think is the ideal size for a group for a role-playing game?
That's a really good question. So I'm inclined to say, for me, it's four people. I've got four classes, three big boys who can play, and then my wife. So it's a really good complementary size. And I've actually never run a game larger than that. Like I said, I've played BX, I've run BX games, but it's always we're scraping the bottom of the barrel to get four players together. But that being said, I did build TinyD10 specifically around like a four group party. But it does. I think it would scale up to 6. It would honestly, you could probably even run 8, just because, like I said, even if you would have 2 of each class. There are different ways to play that class, in a very kind of distinct sense. So 4 is, like I said, it's perfect for me. It's my sweet spot. But I think you could easily do up to 8 with the system.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent.
That's a fairly modern take that I'm surprised how many people even that are around my age go, I've never heard of you playing with more than that. But we used to play with the whole neighborhood. We got all the kids to come over and play.
That is too cool.
We wanted everybody there. And there was the myth is that, well, as kids, you have all the time in the world, but that really not the case. So when we did have a free and open schedule to do this for several hours, we wanted everybody in on the action because
Oh yeah.
it was going to be a party. So we would get, a party in that, everybody can come to a house. We're not getting harassed by the parents. They're not going to throw us out. We've got the place to ourselves, and we want to have as big a group as we can. We got hirelings and henchmen and the big players and everything. And why have NPCs or have to pretend to be 2 or 3 different characters if you can go down the street and get Sue Ann and Trent and they can come and play and be the characters themselves. So it was fun. And people say, well, the problem is people don't have a chance to speak. Well, the problem was getting them to shut up, because they would all scream at each other and having fun, stuff like that. So
yep. Just speak up, just talk louder.
That's right. Yeah. So, but you kind of had to be the school marm, and you get to the point where you start calling on people individually before, they go, well, that slows it down. They go, yeah, it does, but it's also fun.
Exactly. Yeah.
I have a blast doing it that way. But I could see why most people now, they go 5 or 6, 4 or 5, and then that's about all they can do. People say, well, over the internet, it's hard because people talk over one another. Well, they do that anyway. And it's hard because there is a delay, like Dave's typing here. He typed 5 or 6. He probably typed that 3 minutes ago.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, it's easy to accidentally step on people when you play over the internet that way.
Big time. Yep.
Once you get that radio discipline down, everything jives and it's fun, because I wouldn't be playing these games if it wasn't for the internet. In my situation, I don't have a local group or anything like that, unfortunately. Magenta's the closest one to me, and she's about 50 miles away or whatever it is. It's a good hour drive.
About that. Yeah, I guess it is about that far.
So it's neat, but yeah. Magenta, what else you got? Anything?
Oh, I'm trying to think. I don't know as far as questions. I don't, but I do want to say I have really enjoyed our conversation this evening. It's been truly a pleasure to talk with you and learn about your game. I love the concepts that you've gone with this, and building it around your family and sharing it with others. All great stuff.
Well, that's awesome. I appreciate it. This has been a great conversation. You guys are excellent hosts, very good questions. I've had a great time.
Great. Thanks. Yeah, we don't want to keep you too long. It's been about an hour and 20 minutes. So I'm a marathon guy. Now I do have more time than I know what to do with. And that sounds great for people that work all the time. Try it for a while.
Yeah,
Not
I
always
believe
that
it.
great. So, but yeah, as far as playing the thing through, I think it would be fun for us to do that. I'd love to have a bunch of people come on and do a live playthrough. I think it would be fun.
Yeah,
Maybe
That
that
would
sounds
be
like an awesome
exciting.
idea.
yeah, we'd like to have you play too. I mean, everybody likes to play with the creator. If you can find the time to maybe slip through something quick and
Yeah, I'd
easy.
love it. Yeah. If let me start working now. The more time I give myself with my schedule, the more likely I am to be able to do something. So let me start carving away at it now.
All right, sounds good. Great.
Fantastic.
All right. Well, now I always have the after party. So anybody that wants to stick around and talk or chat about anything else that you're here, feel free to do it. I'll stick around, but we appreciate you again for coming. This was great. Our first interview, and we think it went well. We're glad you had fun too. So
Awesome.
thanks
Yep, I had
again.
a blast. Well, thanks, Magenta Storm. You guys are great.
All righty. Thanks so
Same
much.
here. It's our pleasure.
We'll
Take
see you on
care.
Twitter.
Yes, you will.
All righty. Night night.
That was truly enjoyable.
All right. Well, we hope we did it justice. This was our first attempt, and we can only improve. But I think it went well, went pretty smooth. Anybody out there got any questions, comments, criticisms, suggestions? No, nope, nope. Dave says he's in. That's great. Anybody else? Anything? If anything, we're too thorough. Maybe.
Well, I hope my questions were on topic and nothing too hard to handle, because I wanted to, make sure that we were getting, in depth, but not,
Yep. Yep.
yeah, not too weird or anything. So, but please do
Right.
let us know if there was anything that you would have liked for us to ask, or any comments are always welcome. And anyone who would like to, or knows of anyone else who would like to be on the show to participate, you don't always have to be on camera if you're not comfortable with that. Audio is just fine. As you can tell from me, I'm always audio only. So anyone who wants to come on board and just speak up, that is always welcome as well. And do want to remind everyone too, if you enjoy our content, please do like, share, and subscribe, so that we can keep this content coming to you. And I think it was a lot of fun, and I hope we get a chance to do more interviews like that in the future.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Looks like most people got what they wanted out of it, and have, according to my counter, most folks have left. So I'll save the. We were going to do Star Wars and all that, but I think
I
we've run
think if it's
along.
all the same, because I do, on a personal note here, tonight is my mom's birthday. So I have some cake waiting on me. And if it's all the same to everyone who's been
Well,
participating, I think I
as
might
I
call
said,
this one early.
sure,
What?
that
Yeah,
understandable. As I said earlier, 2 episodes ago, I said, "Hey, let's start with a Star Wars," and I love me that Star Wars, as we all know. But my excitement might have ran past our scheduling chops there, so maybe
right.
we'll start that next time.
Yeah, I would
Still learning.
appreciate. I have a few things on my plate over on the home front, so it's been a little bit of a challenge squeezing everything in. But I'm glad I got a chance to be a part of this. Really had a lot of fun, and thank you for being the host for all of this, Storm, and for scheduling our guest. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, this is great. Hopefully, this will continue and we can get some more participation involved in anything. Anybody else got anything to say, comment before we leave? Magenta, feel free to sign off. Thanks so much for doing this. Appreciate the help.
Anytime.
Enjoy your cake.
All right. Thanks, you guys.
And
Have a
happy
good night.
birthday to Mom. All righty. Anybody
All right.
else got anything to say before I sign off? I don't want to cut any. I'm always afraid I'm going to cut somebody off. That's what I'm always scared of. But yeah, seems good. Look for more playthroughs and demos of our system. Hopefully soon.
Yep. Our current schedule right now, we're running on Mondays and Wednesdays, trying to do a little bit earlier, 7 p.m. Seems to be a very good time for a lot of folks. If that doesn't work for you and anyone out there would like to watch at other times, of course, you can always visit the YouTube channel. And we do keep all of our live shows up there for you to view at another time. But if you want to participate, obviously, you're welcome to come in anytime between 7. The shows usually go till 8:30 or 9, sometimes later. So feel free to pop in whenever you like. What's convenient for you. So
if you see me furiously typing, yeah, that's when I figured. Okay, was just going to check something out. So.
Okay, well, I'm going to sign off then. And again, thanks for having me on the show, and hope you guys have a great rest of your evening. Okay.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
All righty. Good night.